Israel has responded to Prince William's call for an end to fighting in Gaza. In a rare statement on the conflict, the heir to the throne said, "I remain deeply concerned about the terrible human cost of the conflict in the Middle East since the Hamas terrorist attack on 7 October. Too many have been killed. I, like so many others, want to see an end to the fighting as soon as possible. There's a desperate need for increased humanitarian support to Gaza. It's critical the aid gets in and hostages are released. I continue to cling to the hope that a brighter future can be found, and I refuse to give up on that." In response, an Israeli government spokesperson said Israelis of course want to see an end to the fighting as soon as possible, and that will be possible once the 134 hostages are released and once the Hamas terror army threatening to repeat the October 7 atrocities is dismantled. We appreciate the Prince of Wales' call for Hamas to free the hostages. We also recall with gratitude his statement from October 11, condemning Hamas's terror attacks and reaffirming Israel's right of self-defence against them. It is highly unusual to have a statement like this one from Prince William, as members of the royal family are expected to stay neutral on political matters. Prince William travelled to the region in 2018, which was regarded as one of the most diplomatically sensitive and difficult trips that he's conducted on behalf of the royal family.
We've been a constitutional monarchy since the late 17th century, and of course part of that deal is that the monarch, or indeed the close immediate royal family, should not interfere with politics that in any way could be seen to affect individual parties. Now, perhaps one of the most classic cases in the 20th century was Edward VIII, who during his brief reign went down to Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales, met thousands of people who'd lost their jobs in the steel industry. In fact, he shook so many hands in the end he had to change and shake with his left hand, and he said something must be done to get these people jobs. It was taken as a direct assault on the Conservative government of the day. And we could go on to Edward Heath, as many saw it, using the Queen to get us to join the common market, and things the Queen said during the referendum on Scottish separation. And we of course could talk about King Charles, who as Prince of Wales endlessly talked about climate change and net zero. But the intervention overnight from Prince William, I think, is the most direct political piece of interference that has international and global implications that I almost think we've ever seen.
Meanwhile, Washington has vetoed a United Nations resolution for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. It's the third US veto of a Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire. The US ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, says the proposed resolution would negatively affect regional negotiations. Washington has proposed its own Security Council to draft a resolution for a temporary ceasefire.
We have made incredibly clear that the resolution before the Council would not achieve the goal of a sustainable peace and may in fact run counter to it. Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible. And so while we cannot support a resolution that would put sensitive negotiations in jeopardy, we look forward to engaging on a text that we believe will address so many of the concerns we all share.
Algeria put forward a resolution at the UN up in New York this morning which called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Now, the United States vetoed that resolution, as they have done with every other resolution that has attempted to demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. What they've done this time is to prepare to put forward, or at least pave the way to put forward, their own resolution, which would also call for a ceasefire, but a different one. There's been a lot of reporting this morning suggesting that the Americans are shifting their position substantially. My reading, having spoken to sources here, is that is wrong. I don't see that the Americans have shifted their position substantially. They are, as I say, putting forward another resolution which may come to a vote next week, which does use the word ceasefire for the first time, which leads some, I think, to think that they are shifting their position. But interestingly, it calls not for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, as everyone else has been calling for, but instead a temporary ceasefire as part of the ongoing hostage negotiations. Now, the American position, as outlined by their ambassador at the UN, is that any immediate humanitarian ceasefire now would undermine the negotiations that are ongoing between Israel and Hamas in Cairo that seek to find a ceasefire in return for the hostages. The argument from the Americans is if you have a ceasefire now, then any demand or any onus on Hamas to release the hostages is removed.